Hey, Bright Lights, it's Angela. Welcome back to the Space Doctor series on the Architecting channel. As many of you know, I'm an architect, Feng Shui practitioner, and research, and I've spent my entire career studying the science behind design for well-being so you don't have to. I know from my own work just how critically important the space we surround ourselves in really is to how we show up every day, whether it's where we live, work, or play. And I want to help you get the most out of the spaces that you're in because we spend all day, every day, navigating the built environment unless you live in a cave out in the wilderness. So my goal with this series is to make very thoughtful weekly videos that give you information in a way that's easy to understand, but most importantly, easy to make changes in your own spaces so that you can benefit from this. And I really do believe that the way that this works is that we get the messages we most need to hear every single week. So we use my Salutogenesis card deck that has two parts: foundational concepts, which are the things that research shows make us well or create disease in our lives. And then what my research has shown are 5 different core theories or aspects of what we can do to create well-being in our lives deliberately. Draw a card from each of those 2 parts of the deck, and you never know what's going to come out. And I have to tell you this, I shuffle every single time. And if you watched last week's episode, you know that under foundational concepts, we got the respiration card. And under the aspects part of the deck, we got biophilia color. And I talked about color theory and color breathing and how respiration, especially when we breathe through our nose, lights up certain brain centers that have an impact on our well-being. So it's not just about oxygenating our blood, it's about lighting up these parts of our brain. It's about telling ourselves that we're safe. It's about expanding our diaphragm to reset the stress response and to really focus on getting that nitrous oxide, which is a neurochemical that gets activated when you breathe through your nose. And when I shuffled this week, I could not believe it. We got, yes, those exact same 2 cards. And I said, I can't possibly do another whole back-to-back segment on the exact same topic. But what my friend Megan reminded me of is that the word respiration has to do with restoring our spirit. That is the root of the word. And that often when we think about spirits and how we can sense them or see them in our lives, whether this is an ancient master, an angel, a spirit guide, or a loved one who's passed, an ancestor, they often show up as colors. So maybe that was the message we were supposed to get with drawing those 2 cards again. But never fear, because I want to have weekly sources of new information. I drew 2 more cards for this week. And so under the foundational concepts, the second card that I drew was oxytocin and the HPA axis. Now you'll notice this card is showing us a crosswalk, and there's the walk, don't walk sign. And the reason that that is the way I chose to depict this concept is because the HPA axis, which stands for hypothalamic-pituitary-adrenal, is a chain reaction that happens when the stress response is set off. So it gets turned on. That could be, if we want to think about it, the don't walk, the thing we really don't want. Oxytocin is a hormone that is released in our body when we feel love, joy, trust, bonding, gratitude. And so we could think of that as the walk, right? The go sign, the green light, the positive thing. And if you've ever been at a crosswalk, you know that walk and don't walk are never both on at the same time. And that is exactly how the relationship between oxytocin and the HPA axis works. They are what we call mutually regulating, which means they can't both be elevated. It's sort of like a scale. They have to balance. So if you are feeling a lot of stress, it's going to block your ability to feel love, gratitude, joy, trust, bonding. And the opposite is also true. So, yes, everything you've read about mindfulness, gratitude, meditation, thinking positive thoughts, it's scientifically proven to be true because all of those things stimulate the production of oxytocin. So that means we want to have positive social interactions as much as possible. We want to reflect on the good things in our lives. We want to be grateful for what is happening that's working in our lives instead of what most of us do, which is only focus on what we don't want or what isn't working. If we do that, especially if we do that at the start of our day, we are setting ourselves up to have less stress in our lives and to be calmer and centered and more relaxed. Sounds like a good idea to me. Now, the card that I drew from the aspects part of the deck is sense of coherence. So this is sort of the ace of that suit. As you know, there are 5 aspects of salutogenesis. Sense of coherence is one of them. It is at its core the ability for something to be meaningful, manageable, and comprehensible to us. It's associated with the metal element in Feng Shui, which is all about logic, reason, being able to make sense of things. So there's a really great fit there. If we think about each of the 5 aspects almost like a suit of cards, the other cards that fall under sense of coherence, which I've drawn quite a few of them in the time I've been making these videos, are sort of an alphabet, if you want to think about it that way, of other theories or practices that are aligned with the idea of being meaningful, manageable, and comprehensible, i.e., sense of coherence. Now, what do these 2 cards have to do with one another? Well, when we are somewhere where we have a high level of sense of coherence, we feel more confidence, we feel more trust, we feel like we can predict what's going to happen next, so our mind can relax, it can focus on solving other problems because our environment is not overwhelming us. We feel that things make sense, they're what we expect them to be, therefore we can kind of settle in, we can relax, we can focus more easily on the good things. So this is why we want sense of coherence in our environment. We want to help people feel that the space is relevant to them, that it's not about other people or a place they don't belong. We want them to feel that they know what to do in this space, that they can figure out the next thing because it's going to have similarities to other spaces they know. And we want them to feel like they have the agency they need to have in that space to make it work for them, that they can manage their environment, that they could choose maybe what type of environment they want to be in, or customize their space in some way. Those are all things you can think about to promote greater sense of coherence in the space. In Feng Shui, we would say that we would want the space to have a lot of connection to things that matter to us. So we'd want to use this idea of environmental anchors, a thing in the environment that means something to us. So you can see in the background here in my office, I have a painting hanging. A painting was painted by an artist who was a good friend of mine and gifted to me. So when I think about it, I think of him, I think about time that we spent together, and I have a positive thought. I'm grateful to have such a talented friend who gifted me this beautiful painting. You can see the lightning bolt on the shelf behind me. The lightning bolt has a lot of personal significance for me because my father, who passed about 16 years ago now, will often show me lightning bolts as symbols of encouragement. He knows that when I see a lightning bolt that he's saying, you got this. It might be a tough situation, but you can do it. And yes, you're meant to disrupt the status quo in that moment and to be the voice of truth, to be the voice of justice and logic and reason, because sometimes it's really easy to go with the flow, even if we're going, I don't know about that. So, the lightning bolt, and believe me, I will see lightning bolts in all kinds of crazy places. One time on vacation, I was walking along a beach, piece of driftwood washed ashore, no kidding, in the shape of a lightning bolt. And I know what that means. So I chose to buy a lightning bolt to put on the shelf so that I would be reminded about that and to live more fearlessly. So there are just a couple examples personally that you can see in my own life of how I'm using environmental anchors, and those create a sense of coherence for me. My home office also happens to be in the love and relationship squad. This squad is not just about romantic relationships, it's any kind of relationship that we have. So it's also true that the two environmental anchors I have not only are positive messages for me, things that I feel love and gratitude around, but they also are about relationships I had or have with other people. This is another way you can layer that to create, through Feng Shui, greater sense of coherence. Because when I see that, it means something to me, it's meaningful, and so it's ticking that part of the sense of coherence triad of criteria. So I hope that this is helping you to see how placing things in our spaces that will either remind us of a certain practice. So if we want to do a gratitude journal, we want to have a really nice place to sit. We want to keep our journal out. We want to have a beautiful journal to write in and a really nice pen. Those kinds of things are ways to make it feel more meaningful, the sense of coherence part, to do the gratitude, to feel the love, to feel the appreciation, which is going to activate the oxytocin. Or we can just have environmental anchors in our own space that are going to remind us of things that are manageable. But in design, we also want to think about spaces that create a sense of belonging and comfort for people, spaces that create analogies to spaces they've already experienced so they don't feel completely disoriented in a new space, but they can understand it based about what they know about other spaces. So if you go to the bank or a grocery store or a school, there's certain things you just know about how to behave in those spaces or how to find things in those spaces, even if you've never been in that particular place before, because they remind you of other spaces you have been in that you are familiar with. So that all works together to, again, create positive feelings. And those positive feelings are going to fuel the oxytocin and lower that stress response. Or just giving somebody more confidence is going to help lower the stress response, which makes more room for the oxytocin to rise. So it's a great pairing that we got this week, and a great message about connecting through breath, through reviving our own spirit to the spirits that are all around us. A little bit of a double click on the cards that we got last week. So I hope you enjoyed this. And if you do, please support this channel by liking and subscribing to this video. And I will see you next time.